don't see
just
this
like
as,
one
we don't
parent,
see the
one
end of the
child.
single vehicle
Much better than
occupancy.
we used to.
This is a parking garage
It's
that's
like,
designed for
okay,
electric
enough.
vehicles.
Plus,
We're,
I accepted a
we
new
hope to have
job.
less single
Yeah.
occupancy vehicles, but for us
It
to
just
simply make an
happened.
assumption in 2017 that there will be none,
Just happened on
Right.
like,
it's just a fallacy. I mean, it's just not gonna reach
I don't
zero.
remember, last
So our thought was,
Friday
and
before
when we
this
had this
past
discussion,
week,
we're gonna
so
build a parking garage.
this week will be my last
And
day
if we
there.
find in 10
No,
years, we have
I'm
a
gonna
significant
go to the
reduction in
everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. You're good? All right, call the meeting to order. Any adjustments to the agenda? Look, it's so full, it has a smaller font than usual.
It actually is because it's a new
The new
program.
template?
Program.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so hearing no adjustments, we'll deem the agenda approved. Number 3 is comments from the chair. So we weren't able to gather a quorum last meeting, and it's okay, it happens sometimes, but I think, for the 2 with newborns, you're off the hook. But for everyone else, we really need to make an effort to be here. You had an emergency, so I understand, and I know you were gonna be out of town, so it really was beyond what most people, it was an emergency, but I just wanted to use it as an excuse to remind everyone that we really need to make an effort. And if we can't meet on a certain day, then we can try to set up another meeting if needed. Of course, I'd like to avoid that because it's hard to keep momentum if we only meet once a month. So it's, I don't blame anyone. I know everybody had extenuating circumstances. I just wanted to remind us all of the necessity of being here. The second thing I wanted to mention to everyone is that Kirby and I had lunch with Eric Gilbertson, who is the chair, I think, of the Historic Preservation Commission. Commission, right? Not committee.
Yes, commission.
Thanks, Barb. And he is a member of the Design Review Committee. And he's been a member of that for many years. And he gave us a quick overview of the Historic Preservation / Design Review Committee work that's been undertaken, that has been submitted to us to review, and that they're going to present to us in June. So I really encourage everyone to make it to that meeting. I think we're looking at June 10th. Is that right?
Yeah, we're going to set the date. Number
Okay.
6 will.
Oh, number 6. Okay, so we'll set the date.
Leslie, is that gonna be our next meeting then? Or because we won't have one on Memorial Day, or do we wanna reset the Memorial Day meeting?
Well, we can talk about that. Let's do that under item 9. Since we didn't meet last time, it might be a good idea to do that, but let's just hold on to that for now. And but good question, Barb. Okay. Any other old business, for lack of a better word? Okay. So, item 4, general business, comments from the public about something not on the agenda. There are no members of the public present, so we'll move on to item 5, which is for Mike to provide us an update on consultant selection for the Montpelier Downtown Master Plan.
Okay, RFP. So we did the RFP, we did the request for proposals. We got 5 applicants, and we had a committee that included 3 transportation folks, 2 from the transportation infrastructure, 1 from the Complete Streets, which was Gary Holloway. Then we had 2 kind of open space, Elizabeth Courtney and Ricarda Erickson from the River Conservancy. And then we had 2 economic folks, the MDC director and Dan from Montpelier Alive. So they were the review committee for the 5 applications. Went through, narrowed to a short list, and had interviews and hired SE Group, who did work with St. Albans and a couple other communities, a lot of work in Burlington on their Great Streets project. So we're really happy to have them on board. I've known members of the team for a long time, but I haven't actually worked with any of them directly on a project, so it'll be good. So the only comment that had been made on about their proposal was there was a feeling that they didn't have enough public input. They actually had a lot that was more on the technology side. They're going to have websites and interactive, a lot of the whiz bang things that John would love. But some of them wanted
We all love 'em,
a couple of more more meet the people where they are type things. So SE Group is giving us a revised public input plan that will involve more direct face-to-face. So going to farmers markets, going to parades, events. Rather than try to get people to come to you, they're going to have more events where they go out to where people are. So he's coordinating. Mark Kane, who's SE Group, is coordinating with Dan at Montpelier Alive to kind of coordinate when the big events are with when they can come out and try to work with the public, try to get their input on some of the ideas for making state and Maine, kind of coming up with that downtown master plan of what we want to try to see. I know the council is excited and on board, and they have a number of ideas. They know these are kind of expensive endeavors, but they're kind of looking at, they really want to see if we could kind of do one of those large downtown projects that have been done in Barrie and Winooski, and they really want to get in and see if we could kind of make 21st century streets out of our downtown. We've got to replace the street trees anyways with the emerald ash borer. We have to do more stormwater treatment, so this is a great opportunity for us to get in and kind of transform our streets. And
Doesn't St. Albans have rain gardens or some sort of fancy stormwater treatment system?
yeah, they have some, and the same group that helped do some of those are going to help here. I guess we'll learn a lot from what St. Albans learned as the first one. The same group, the Watershed Consulting Group, also did our demonstration project that's being built this summer on Taylor Street. So Taylor Street's actually going to have a lot of those rain gardens and tree boxes, tree cells, silva cells, which are going to have catchments underneath. So as stormwater goes in, they go through through the cell, and then there's a catchment pipes on the bottom to bring the water to the
Treatments.
Yeah, so the treatment is through those tree beds. So it's a neat system. A lot of it we're doing as a demonstration project on Taylor Street. So Public Works, the tree board, and other departments get a chance to kind of see how they work, how easy is it for maintaining them, all of those types of things. And so hopefully what we learn there we can transfer to state and Maine when we redo those streets.
Can you give us a little bit more context about how you're envisioning this fitting within the city plan development process?
So this is really a nuts and bolts plan for the publicly owned parcels. So they will look at the parking lots as well, because a lot of this involves trade-offs. The current plan for State and Maine, or for Barrie, the Barrie Street intersection, they did the scoping study. The plan there is to take some on-street parking off of Main Street as well as Barrie Street. So there's a net loss of 30 or 40 parking spaces, so we have to balance that. So we really have to look at all the pieces of our parking networks to kind of decide, if there's a desire to have more park space and we have to remove parking, then that's, we'll need to have more answers for parking, and maybe that comes with the parking garage, maybe that comes in another parking somewhere else. But it's kind of going to be looking at all of the downtown, all the publicly used pieces in the downtown. That's going to obviously plug into the city plan, but the city plan is really looking kind of big picture, and it would probably mention that one of the, as we talk about how to implement our city plan, one of the things is going to be implementing the downtown master plan, because that's a big lift. But if people want to have bike lanes in the downtown, at some point there's just no getting around the fact that you're going to have to shut down the street and bang out some curbs and start moving things around if you want to have new street trees and new drainage systems, and we'll have to make some big decisions. And I think what we'd end up with is, in our city plan, a discussion of how are we going to be, in the natural resources, we might be talking about stormwater and the importance of treating stormwater. And then, one thing is going to be, how do we treat stormwater in the downtown? It's more challenging than once you get out of downtown, you can treat a lot of stuff on site. And it becomes more challenging when you get to a place that's 100% impervious. But you can do it with technology. The parking garage will treat all of its stormwater on site before it discharges. In fact, a bunch of it will discharge into the sewer system, so that way it gets treated at the plant as well. But treating the stormwater that's on our streets is going to be an important piece, and that's just one example of all the things that are going to come up in our downtown. So there may be a number of goals that'll come up in the city plan broadly that we'll be implementing in the downtown master plan when it gets constructed.
So, Mike, it's called a master plan, but really it's state and Maine. It's the two streets, really, right?
Yes. So we had a master plan for the Capitol complex, which
Right.
is from Taylor Street and Governor Davis over to Bailey. So that
Just
box.
not ours, yeah.
Yeah, that's
the
theirs.
Capitals.
We've done a master plan and are building out Taylor Street, so we'll have that street done. And then the idea was, originally, let's do State Street to Main, so that way we're just kind of build off of this. What would the street lamps look like? Because the light poles that light the streets don't actually work very well. They're very old and need to be replaced. So we have a number of things that just need to be replaced on there, including the Rialto Bridge, and we figured this would be a time to just shut down that section of street, fix that up. And then when questions came up about what to do about Confluence Park and the Moat property where M&M Beverage was, then we had to expand this into a broader discussion. And then Main Street out to school across to Elm and down, so obviously Langdon Street would be in.
Includes Langdon Street and that square. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there is kind of a piece. Obviously, our emphasis is on State and Main and Barry to Hubbard, actually. We wanted to get past, we didn't want to stop at the rec facility, because you really have to discuss how, let's say somebody coming down the hill in Barry, coming into town, how do they transition to the bike lane if you're on Barry Street? We really want to look back as far as Hubbard Street to see maybe it's all the way back to Hubbard Street that we don't have on-street parking. Maybe it comes off later, but we'll look at a slightly larger picture so we can kind of fit all the pieces in.
I had one other question. Is the actual proposal public knowledge? I mean, can we see their proposal?
Yep.
In terms of what they're going to be doing?
Yep. Yeah, that's, try to think of
We
where's
should
the
add it
easiest
to
way to
our
get it.
website.
We should. It'd just be good to know in terms of what they're
Yeah, I'll-
including, what they're not, so we don't ask questions that they're not covering.
Yeah, I'll try to
So,
send out a copy of the,
where did the guiding principles come from that were included in the RFP? Like, for instance, like the bike lanes, like where did the idea come from?
for,
For bike lanes to be part of this master plan, like the things that are actually that are to be addressed.
so there's been a Montpelier in Motion plan, and then there was a Complete Streets plan that came out as well, which talked about a lot of how to get bikes and pedestrians into the downtown. And then it was left off that the downtown is so complex, we can't just come up with a set of general rules. We really have to plan for specifically where they're going to end up being. State and Maine was kind of the piece that needed to be answered for a number of projects. We have TIF, the projects for Sabins Pasture and these other projects can't get Act 250 approval until there's a fix for Berry and Main intersection. So we kind of had this thing on our list of things to find an answer for. We knew we had the bike lane coming through, so we still had the question of how do bikes get from Main Street to the rec center. We've got a bike path built that side and a bike path built that side, but nothing in the middle. So we had a number of these questions, so the Public Works Department did the scoping study for the Berry and Main intersection, which included most of the downtown. So that project and proposal is going to be the foundation that these other folks will work off of. And that one was looking at, okay, well, where are we going to put the bikes? You know, because whether you have bikes or don't have bikes and where you put them makes, because the question was, do we put a roundabout or do we put a street light at Berry and Main? And then same question for Main and Berry, and then State and Main, same question, and then School and Main, same question. Do we have a roundabout? Do we have a light? And it was found that you can actually make roundabouts work at any of them. But
Don't they have to all be roundabouts though?
there was a question of them all being roundabouts, and then it came out that you could do a hybrid if State and Main were a light, you could still make it work. I don't know what the final decision is yet for the council. I don't know if that's coming up. I'm just looking at their board up there. I don't see it on that one. So I don't know if they have voted yet on which is their preferred alternative that they're going to have the consultant finalize. I think the consultant is recommending a hybrid, but the recommendation is just that. It's a recommendation, and council can decide, and there are councilors who have said that they would prefer the roundabout alternative. So we kind of have to see where that goes, but that's kind of where some of those foundational pieces came from, was the complete streets plan. We have to plan for bikes, pedestrians, and motorists. But the question starts to come in limited real estate. Do we need to remove on-street parking? If we do, where do those cars go? You know, what is the impact economically? You know, are we better having the bikes share the road in a share road situation, which would be perfectly fine. You could simply just go through, as we do now on State Street, it's share road. If you want to ride your bike, you ride with the traffic, and that's a perfectly fine alternative. But if we wanted to encourage more biking and having less conflicts, and we want to encourage younger and older people to be able to feel safe riding a bike, then you sometimes want to have a separated bike lane, which means removing on-street parking, and so that's where they put that in. But hopefully those decisions will be made before SE Group starts to.
So it sounds like we
work on
need
it.
someone to synthesize these other reports.
A lot of it is synthesizing, and a lot of it is, you know, it's kind of taking what was plans out here, you're starting to get closer up, because while that was a plan that talked about a lot of the very important pieces, where are the cars, where's the parking, where are the bike lanes, where are the sidewalks, it didn't get into where are the street trees. Do we want street trees? Do we want benches? Where do we want benches? Street lights. How often do we want street lights? Do you want, you know, you're starting to get into much finer detail. If we've got a bump out for a crosswalk, that shortens the signal. You know, something I learned at a meeting a few weeks ago. So how long a crosswalk light turns everything red depends on how far the crosswalk is. And so by putting bump outs, you can shorten that time, which helps traffic flow better.
By the
But
way,
if you're
it's too short at the intersection between Memorial Drive and
you have to
Field
run.
Street.
Yeah.
It does look short.
It is.
But you do, you then have to start to decide where you're going to put your street lights, because you know, I think we've all been in communities where you're driving along and all of a sudden there's somebody in a crosswalk and you didn't even see them because there's not a light pole there so you can see them if the sun is down. So I think there are just a lot of pieces that once you get past where we are right now, which is we've got a course scale, we know where lanes are, we know the turn lanes are, we know whether this is a roundabout or a street light, got all those answered. Now we need to talk about the details. Where do we put our crosswalks? Where do we put our curbs? How wide? Let's make some final arguments as to whether we want 4-foot separated bike lanes or 5-foot separated bike lanes, and start to make these very detailed questions, because if everybody agrees, the next step would then be to basically bring it into the hands of the civil engineers and start to go through and say, okay, if we were going to build this thing out, let's start looking at conflicts. Let's start looking at what works. You know, is there, you know, and they have Stantec on board, who is one of our primary engineers we work with. And so a lot of these questions will hopefully be addressed early. Their SE group kind of was the choice because they had worked on so many projects that had gone from conceptual to built. And we wanted somebody who is looking ahead. So we're talking here, they're already looking ahead to know
So Aaron,
what's next.
since you just joined us, we're on item 5.
Yeah.
And the quick update is that the consultant that's been selected is the SE group, and Mark Kane is the principal on that.
Yep.
Who you should
Yeah.
know from your time working with him. And they did some work in St. Albans and Burlington to develop downtowns in a more cohesive approach. And so this would be really state and Maine. And what I'm understanding is they have Stantec on board, which is what you're just getting at.
Mhm.
They're going to be looking at the complete streets report, the Montpelier in motion report, and then taking them a little bit further and developing more detail. I'm still not entirely clear on how we will be interacting with Mark and his group. It seems like maybe we're delegating an aspect of the city plan a little bit here, but we also would want an opportunity to weigh in, and so it sounds like that hasn't all been fully developed yet, which is fine, but maybe we could continue talking as he presents ideas and we nail down
Yeah, we
an
can
approach.
certainly keep everybody in the loop on what where they're at and what are the pieces that are going on. And if you want them or him to present, you know, as they wrap up pieces, we can have them try to go and
I
build
would like
that
us
in.
to be involved. I mean, I just don't want to get, a final product at the end and I say, oh no, we I don't know that would happen, but there is a risk that will happen if we don't integrate feedback. And yes, we can individually, as members of the public, provide feedback, but I think that our group is greater than the sum of its parts here. I mean, we are a committee that's been working together, and
Mhm.
we have kind of a sense of some of the issues where the public might feel strongly, and it would be great to be able to provide some input along the way. How do others feel about that? Any thoughts on process you want to provide now before we get too far down the road?
I had a question about what you said before, Mike, so are they gonna be waiting on decisions from council before they get started?
Yes, but D and K is supposed to have the Berry, Maine scoping study done by the end of this month.
So that's another piece that they need to be.
Yeah, that's one, but they can start doing other pieces. So we're working on their contract right now. But there are integrating a lot of plans that are out there. So there's not just those plans. We have the EDSP. We've got the Net Zero Vermont competition and the results, all those results, which they are aware of. So we've got a number of different pieces that and plans that are out there that they can start reviewing and assembling and pulling things together, even if they don't have the final Berry, Maine scoping study yet.
What's their timeline for the project?
They're planning to start in June and be done by March.
Okay. I'm just looking at their website.
But most of the heavy lifting will be done by December, January. You know, most of that ending stuff is presentations to council and.
So can you give us sort of just the skeleton of their plan, you know, for developing their ideas I mean, because you said they were planning to go to the farmer's market, so I'm assuming they're going to be doing that this summer.
Yes.
For example. So, I mean, I guess, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot because you don't have their actual proposal in front of you.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but yeah. So they kind of broke into three pieces, one of which was kind of compiling. The first one is to compile all of the information and to start working with stakeholders on kind of the development of issues, problems, you know, understanding all of the plans that are out there, where the conflicts may exist, bringing all that together. And then there's a second piece, which is, I guess they called refining the vision, where they're going to be trying to go and then work with the public to go through and said, this is what we found in doing all of our homework. And then after that's where the farmers markets and these the things in the windows where people can punch stuff in and text things in and their thoughts and put stuff online. So they would have a lot of these opportunities for people to provide input in this second window. And then the third window is this is what we've heard, this is where we're starting to put stuff together, and then start looking for reactions from people on alternatives. You know, here are a couple of alternatives. It won't be as.
That seems like a good time for us to get involved. The third.
Oh, yeah, you definitely should be in on the third, but yeah, the second or the third would be,
Okay.
you know, because they're going to need to have your input before, but
Okay.
you'll definitely want to be watching what's
Okay.
going on in the third piece. But I think that's going to be, that's kind of how they, you know, if I'm clumsily
Thank you.
lumping them together.
Seems like we'll be farther along in the city plan process and maybe be a little more informed than we are now too. So
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more prepared to have that conversation then.
Thank you for all the detail. Any other thoughts or questions about that? Okay.
All right, so I'll send out a copy of their proposal.
Thank
It
you.
doesn't have, we're still waiting on their revised public input proposal, so it'll just be what they submitted.
And are the complete streets report or the Montpelier in motion report, are those on the website somewhere?
I would think they would be. They're-
And the city's website, I don't know if they're on ours.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the city's website, but maybe they're under the transportation.
Yeah,
Sure,
Transportation
yeah.
Infrastructure
Okay.
Committee, yeah.
With the new format, it's gonna be a lot easier to find things, isn't it, Mike?
I would hope so. I'm not the web guy, but I hope so.
Right, hoping.
Okay. That's item 5. So item 6, update on historic preservation commission's efforts to revise design review provisions in the zoning bylaws. So, as background, for those of you who didn't get to go through this with all of us, when we were working on all of the zoning changes, there we kind of stumbled when we reached the design review section, and we heard a lot of feedback that the current design review process was not working particularly well. And we came to the conclusion as a committee, or at least I came to this conclusion, I think the group agreed, but that it seemed to be an issue of lack of clarity in what the standards were and how they were being applied was being perceived as arbitrary. So we sought to clarify the standards and reduce the opportunity for discretion within those standards. And we received a lot of pushback from the design review Well, it was really more of the historic
Historic
preservation group, which had been disbanded, or not disbanded, but
Inactive.
inactive for quite a while, and so individual members of the group came to our meetings and said, hold on, first of all, no, don't adopt these standards because they're not aligned with the Secretary of Interior standards, and we think those are the gold standard that we should be applying. In addition, people who seek federal tax credits,
And I think there's some grants available
Grants?
for buildings that are located in places where the standards are applied.
yeah,
I understand that.
they have to meet these Secretary of Interior standards, so having them
Right.
apply
To be
as part
eligible
of
for the grant, you have
city.
to meet the standards,
So
so
you,
the argument is why not just require it? There's actually a failure of logic there if you think about it.
Yeah.
It's
but
like
that was there.
requiring everyone to do it just because it's a grant requirement. It's not.
Right,
It's
so
not all
the,
buildings.
They're
I
so
mean,
connected as.
it doesn't, you only need it for, you can only eligible for grants if you have a commercial property, so it really, you know, and then applying it to all the residential properties is, anyway, so, then we put it back on them and said, okay, if you don't like our language, give us what you think we should work with. And they said, okay, well, we need to get a grant to do that. So that effort was undertaken, and they are now reporting back on that. That's my understanding of where we are, right, Kirby, Mike?
Yeah, and we had some public input, and the public didn't exactly come out in favor of it either. We had a room full of people who didn't want us expanding the historic preservation and.
Well, there was a couple issues that were getting conflated. As far as the actual design review standards that are in the zoning, I've summarized that. The other issue that Mike is talking about is that in conjunction with changing the standards, we were thinking about changing the area, the design review overlay district, and the Federal Historic Register lines didn't align with the city's historic overlay district. I don't know a better way to describe
Yeah,
it.
the
So-
design review isn't the same as the historic district.
So we felt like it was a no-brainer to align those two. The public didn't agree. So,
On what basis? It does seem like a no-brainer.
They didn't like it.
well, it means more regulation on the people who weren't previously in the design review district and now would be. And given the perception of arbitrarily applied standards by the design review committee, the public that were soon to be regulated were very upset about this concept. So the city council heard anecdote after anecdote about unfortunate processes before the design review committee, which may or may not, I mean, they were all one-sided, and the design review committee came up and some of them gave, just really Eric spoke, Eric Gilbertson. And Eric has incredible expertise. He used to be the state historic preservation officer for many years. But with great expertise often comes people getting in the weeds really fast. And so we'd hear resident after resident complaining about the process, and then he'd get up there and talk about how the trim needs to look a certain way, and it just wasn't a very compelling counter-argument. So I think, city council agreed with our recommendation to just wait. I don't remember exactly procedurally how it all played out, but ultimately it came back to us to just wait and get this input on the standards from the Historic Preservation Commission with input from the Design Review Committee. They were tasked with together coming up with standards that they thought were acceptable and that would be applied, because the Design Review Committee is the committee that actually applies the standards. So, and then what they do is they provide a recommendation that goes to the DRB. So,
That goes to the DRB or the city council?
to the DRB, who
Oh,
then
okay.
issues the
They
decisions
approve-
about, right.
They approve
Permit.
the design review district or the design review regulations?
Oh, so the projects that are being
Oh.
presented, the development projects or.
Right, they would use
But the actual
standards.
district does need to be approved by
Okay,
city council,
okay.
you're right. Yep.
And
But-
so we have standards that we'll hear about from Eric later on, but the boundary decisions, they don't really have a suggestion for that, just as a heads up. Like, that's still an unsettled question that it seems like we're going to have to continue with.
Well,
Is the
actually,
federal-
they
oh.
pushed it through, after everything quieted down, didn't the historic preservation, the historic district boundaries change? I'm fairly certain that they did.
Historic did, yes, but not design review.
Okay,
So this will be looking at the design review.
the
Is the
boundaries.
historic
okay.
district
Generic
bigger
policy
than the
doesn't
design review district?
They're actually
Just different
kind
areas.
of different areas. They
Okay.
partially overlap.
If you happen to be into design review and are not part of the historic district, then there are different standards that apply to you. And we
Oh.
wanted to have kind of the same set of standards, but then certain aspects of them wouldn't apply. But I don't know exactly how the Historic Preservation Commission landed on that, which we will be hearing about.
Yeah, we had one of the questions that we put to them to decide was, and I'll need to go and read carefully, see where they came out on it, was did they want design review standards? Did they want historic preservation standards, or did they want a mixture of both? Because you can have design standards that apply to Route 302, nothing historic out there, and you could have, some historic rules that are very specific about historic structures, and you can't do X, Y, and Z to historic structures, and if you're a non-contributing structure, then whatever you do can't have a negative impact on the historic structures. So it's really kind of a much lesser. But then there's these mixes of the two. And what we have now in the old rules that are still in effect is kind of a mixture of both. It never really makes itself one or the other. It's kind of, a little bit of these scenic and design requirements, and then one that says, and you can't have a negative impact on the historic character. So part of this, when you start talking about the boundary, is if you're only doing historic preservation, it doesn't make sense not to be outside the historic district. Places like National Life, the areas past the high school, so the Vermont Electric or the Green Mountain Power, and those buildings are all in the design control district, even though none of them are historical.
And how was the design review boundary originally determined? Do you know?
I don't have the history
Nobody
of that
knows.
one.
That came out in the
That is
meeting, don't you remember that?
76.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
thought we were
Everyone's
talking
like,
about
well,
how
shouldn't
the
we look
historic
into how
boundary
it got to be this way? And,
Yeah.
we just don't have that
and why they
information.
didn't coincide. I certainly understand, but it does seem like some aspects of the design review district are a bit bizarre.
Do you mind if I close the window? Sorry.
Oh,
There's
go
a
right
couple-
ahead.
There's a
Fine.
couple open.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just gonna close this one.
So for people who got the three, that is the current version of what we have in effect. The big heavy one is the draft of what they're proposing. And then Eric Gilbertson sent you guys a memo with his,
Right.
kind of a 2.5-page memo of his input.
And you just emailed these out today,
And I
right?
just
So with
emailed them out today,
so
so
we have
that,
'em.
yeah, so the thought wasn't that we would review these tonight, but that if I got them to you tonight, then you would have them for the next meeting, which they were gonna look to try to come on June 10th or June 24th, depending on,
They're looking
how it
for
works
their
out.
critical mass.
yeah, so they sent out a feeler as to which day worked best for them, and either the 10th or the 24th would work for them.
So we're gonna wait and hear back. Meredith has been trying to herd those cats and try to get as many people from both the Historic Preservation Commission and Design Review Committee to attend as possible, because I think and I would encourage all of you to come. I don't know what date it'll be yet, the 10th or the 24th, so we'll let you know as soon as possible, but the more people that can be part of that discussion, I think the more productive it'll be.
So is it gonna be part of our meeting, or it's gonna
Mhm.
be,
Those
okay,
are our
so,
current dates.
you're just saying
Yeah.
come to our meeting. Okay.
They're coming to us.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. I wasn't sure the way you said encourage you to come.
Yeah. Just want to make sure we all
Here.
come.
If you could-
Here.
Just once June hits, hopefully the weather will be nicer. It's harder and harder to get here, but we gotta, yeah. So anyway, so the set possible joint meeting, I think that did I add that before Meredith sent out the email?
Actually, Audra
did it.
Audra kind of, after we were talking about it, we were like, well, let's at least put it on there as a reminder that we could set the possible joint meeting. So that way it's,
We have to notice that any earlier than we would normally for our meetings?
no, certainly not for you guys, because your meetings is that night. If
Mhm.
they're going to have a quorum of people there, then there's some special rules they might have to. We might have to
Okay.
word the agenda in such a way that it says that there's a possibility of a quorum of historic preservationists or design review folks that might be here.
So what's the process, and then they're presenting it to us, and then they're gonna go back and change things based on comments, or what's the?
My understanding is that they want to go and actually take this first to the planning commission, and then second to and I don't know if they're asking us to do the public outreach and then go to council. They're not going to adopt these rules in their entirety. What they need to do is to get enough public input that they know these are going to be acceptable, because what they want to do after this is to do design guidelines, because these kind of need a guideline design book, which
Just
we
giving
had
people a little bit
people
more
who were
clarity
here.
as to what it means to like rehab or restore or replace.
It's a
Whatever what the
very
exact terms are.
graphic set of guidelines that just go through and say, yes, we want this, no, we don't want this. These types of windows are good, these are not. This is, when we talk about maintaining the fenestration, this is what we mean. We want to see this, not this. Shelburne has a good set of rules, and Brandy, when she was working with us on the zoning, gave us ones from around the country. They're just very, 100+ pages of kind of this and that type scenarios, but we can't spend the money making that type of spending that much if somebody comes in later on and says, yeah, but we're not going to do that. So what they want to do is kind of run this through, but we can't really adopt it because we wouldn't have the guidelines. But there's no sense making the guidelines till we have a good sense that this is where the public would like us to go. So I think that's the catch-22 that they're in, is that they want to try to kind of get some feelers on this, see what the public thinks, see what the planning commission thinks, see what the council thinks, and then move forward with the guidelines.
So we would provide them input. Potentially, we could ask for updates, or we could just take it and make the updates. And then at some point, we recommend to council that they give the green light to develop guidelines using these rules. That's what I'm.
I think so.
Feeling out.
And then it would all come back for us to have a full adoption of the new
Right.
standards plus the guidebooks that go along with it.
So, and maybe just, because these seem fairly detailed to me, but the design guidelines will be more about the buildings, or can you tell me a little bit more about what the,
I think
Like
we'll
with
get
the
more
additional-
when they give their presentation.
oh, okay.
They'll-
Yeah, maybe
they
it's a
should-
question for after I've actually read this.
Yeah, because there is, I think they do have quite a lot of specific in here. Because I think there's what they have under, general design standards, and then they have some specific design standards, and then there's the guidelines that would go along with each of these.
There's still a lot of subjective language in here. Like, talks a lot about how an addition shall not overwhelm the primary
Yeah,
facade.
I saw that too.
You know, so I think this guidance would be like an interpretation, I hope.
Yeah, that's
Of-
what
of
you
this kind of
need to
stuff.
have the guidebook that would explain
There-
what that means.
Windows in the facade shall create a rhythm. Like,
Most properties change
seems like
over
some
time.
interpretation is in order.
You don't
Yep.
know what
Those
rhythm is?
changes. Yeah, here's
Would you
another
find
one.
that?
Most properties change over time. Those changes that have acquired historic significance in their own right shall be retained and preserved. So,
Okay.
yeah, there's
Thank you.
a lot
That's,
of
that's
aspects
helpful
that
to
can-
understand kind of what the.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, I mean, there's no requirement that we have to have a design review district, right?
Correct.
Or- okay. Just
But
curious.
don't we have to have some historic?
If we want to have a CLG, then we
Right.
need to have, which is certified local government, for historic preservation purposes, then we need to have design standards.
But not a design review district. You have to have HP design standard or?
Depending on which argument you're having with which person in historic preservation.
Oh.
So, you're supposed to have standards that would protect, that would preserve or protect the historical integrity of the district. So that would be the standards.
So you could have them apply citywide and we could get rid of a district. I think the point is just that we need regulation, some kind of design review regulations for a lot of different reasons. That our TIF district and our designated downtown as well need some kind of design review regulations.
It's possible, as I understand it, to have two sets of regulations. We could have a stricter central downtown area and then the less strict outer area, which, because some folks who have elected in the past would be in the kind of outer part of the historic district, so.
I think that, yeah, that was something we had discussed and we're maybe moving towards, because we have a designated downtown area that's the commercial core, and then most of the complaints were coming from sort of single-family homeowners replacing windows or siding, and we didn't hear much from the commercial owners, so there was this thought that there could be a higher standard for the downtown commercial core, designated downtown, it's already a boundary, and then different
Because
standards.
Those are the ones that can apply for the grants.
Right, and the rationale being that there are actually public funds available to
Offset the added costs.
yeah, offset the added costs where that it's not an option for the residential properties.
You have to see what the DRB thinks of that, because it would be a little harder for them to have two sets of standards to apply to.
But if it's if it's two separate districts, then you're just applying one set to one district and one set to the other district, so it doesn't make any more work for the DRB. The issue starts to come up if it were citywide. The design review committee, the DRC currently reviews all projects in the design review district. If we went citywide, that would simply exponentially increase their workload, and everybody would have to go to DRC. So that would be just a consideration, unless there was a separate process for them as well.
Yeah, I think I meant DRC earlier when I said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they may not like having two sets of standards to have to keep track of. I don't know.
Yep. But I think a lot of these are good questions to ask them, because they're going to come here with their PowerPoint and present to you guys. And I think they're the ones to ask a lot of questions. I haven't met with them about these. I was given a draft over the winter that I reviewed and gave some comments on, and my brain didn't retain enough of it for me to thoughtfully give you guys some input. So they've made some revisions to that draft, so I haven't seen the final version until now.
Nice. And Barb, you're a you have a historic architect specialty, right?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say a specialty. Sorry, I came back with a bad cough. But certainly have been involved with buildings in the city and other places that had historic aspects to them. So,
What I'm getting at is you might have to be our translator.
okay. Sure. And actually, I think at one point, Mike had given out copies, I think, of the one that Brandy did before, which was for
Yeah,
Stowe? No,
Shelburne.
Shelburne, right. And in terms of looking at guidelines, that's really helpful, because it actually has drawings and indications of what they're, so it would be easier to see how those two pieces fit together.
Mike,
So-
do you think you could add that to the Google Drive, just so people can take a look at it if they want? Maybe the historic preservation documents that the commission sent to us, and then the Shelburne standards. So interested planning commissioners can review.
If there's going to be a document created, and I'm not necessarily asking for more work, but I think the ideal thing would be to have a side-by-side of what currently exists and what they're proposing here. That would just be ideal if we could. You guess what I mean by side-by-side, where there's the two columns. One is like, this is what it has now, and this is what's either being added or removed over here.
Well, I think there's just so much being added.
The
There's a lot being added.
currently exists is basically what was there before, right? We just took what was in the zoning document previously.
Yes.
And so it's,
Wasn't it just like follow the Secretary of the Interior standards?
No, we wanted to do that. They said,
it was,
we said follow them
Yeah,
except when it
mix.
comes to windows and historic preservation commission didn't like that and anyway.
Yeah.
So this is
Yeah,
what
they-
the current zoning has
It's
Mike
pretty-
printed out for us. And it's pretty bare bones.
Yeah, most of them for point D is most applications are going through point D on that
Yeah.
front page, which is just preservation and reconstruction of the appropriate historic style if the proposed project is in the historic district or involves a historic structure. That should be, the committee shall evaluate design review plans based on the following considerations. So, it is pretty general right now.
One question though is, why is it insufficient? One question for our, for our meeting later, maybe.
Why is this
Yeah.
insufficient?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
it's,
It really doesn't meet the legal answer is if somebody really wanted to press us on JAM golf, we would probably lose, which is a
It's too
court
big.
decision on vagueness, yeah.
Yeah, regulations can be void for vagueness. But it's
Yeah.
pretty rare that rises to the level of being void for vagueness.
Well, this one is pretty much asking for it to say that the DRC shall consider the location and appearance of utilities. How is a applicant gonna know whether or not?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just nothing there to sink your teeth into. I mean, there might be some of these that we can, in a 1 through 7, we might be able to find 2 of them that we could sufficiently feel comfortable with, but there really should be more meat on the bones to go through and say, that's a good standard. So usually if you've got a performance standard, you'll have a guideline or an entire book of design guidelines, but that's usually what you hope for with these, so you don't get thrown out in court. They exist because nobody's challenged them. For the most part, the DRC really doesn't deny applications. They do a lot of working with people to help them make their projects better, and most people come back appreciative of the process. So
One of the big complaints we had was explained. Well, the DRC or their argument explaining the complaints they heard was that a lot of these applicants came in having already bought materials, and when the DRC said they couldn't use those particular materials or windows, then that's when the conversation went a little off the rails. So when people come to them early and work through, problem solve with them, then tends to be a more successful collaboration. But when people come in with an idea, this is what it is, I have funding for it, that's what I'm gonna do, it hasn't worked as well.
Or they've already done it. It's
Or
a-
they've already done it, yeah. So that's the background that led us to where we are. And I'm interested to see what we're gonna see from them. We can probably expect at least one member of the public to come.
Yes, we'd probably
Okay.
expect that one.
We've had one member of the public who's been tracking this very closely, and,
As long as
was-
they stay out, that's all he cares.
well, I'm sure he has other interests because his neighborhood is currently not regulated, but
Yes.
anyway, so, we'll see. That'll be in June sometime. Okay, anything else about?
Did we
this
want to
tr-
set that date? So we can,
I think we should wait till, I mean, do we need to tonight cause it seems like Meredith is getting email replies. Are you on that chain?
yeah, there's a
With all
lot
of
of
it-
it kind of going back and forth, but so.
Is she
that
waiting
I
for-
can-
To warn a hearing, or?
No, it was just to warn the joint meeting, so we just wanted to make sure everyone was,
Meredith sent an email out to all the committee members on the DRC and then for his HPC and included Mike and me on it and asked people what dates they could come. And tonight's meeting was possibility, and then clearly it wasn't gonna work. So what I saw was most people can make either meeting. One person prefers the 24th, but I didn't know if she's waiting for us to give the green light or.
yeah. So I guess if you're okay with either, I'll leave it up to Meredith to set the date for the joint meeting then, and we'll,
Is there a date when, is anyone anticipating not being around on,
I won't be here on the 10th.
okay, so let's do the 24th. That combined with the one member's preference.
okay.
We don't make plans because
It's too late, we just did. Is everyone okay with that? Okay,
Yeah, that's good.
June 24th.
Déjà basis.
Right? That's historic.
It is.
So June
We have
24th.
to bring poutine.
Yeah, I think that's compatible.
Would not turn that down.
Doesn't overwhelm the facade. Okay. Moving on, item 7, city plan. So, we're gonna this, I don't know if I wrote this or Mike wrote this, because it's been a few weeks, but, we had been looking at a map and dropping pins left and right with ideas about things that we wanna do in the city. And then we decided we should probably take a step back and revisit the goals that the committees provided us at the all committee kickoff meeting that we hosted. So I don't know if people had a chance to revisit those. I did print out a copy, I tried to print out copies, but I was unsuccessful. So I can walk us through what I have as a reminder. Anyone else who has computers with them, I think you can access
Is
it.
it one of the attachments on the?
It's in the Google Drive, and it was pretty easy to find, actually.
What?
I can't remember where I found it.
Well, I printed it out, I can't say that I.
That's 100%.
Well,
my
we're
night.
gonna go through it together right
Yeah.
now. So we'll give Stephanie a second to pull it up.
Oh, go ahead. I'll see if I can find out what we're talking about.
Okay. So, let's move this out of the way, this is confusing. So Barb is on Montpelier Energy Advisory Committee. So, I mean, my review of this is that they really have one goal, which is that the city should go 100% renewable. Is that fair to say?
Well, net zero energy, yes. So you can translate that as 100% renewable. but
Okay, what is
it's,
the difference?
Well,
It says 100% renewable. in the scribe that you wrote.
In that, well, I'm describing what they said, yes, okay, all right. We'll take their words. All right, 100% renewable. And was there a date?
There are a couple dates offered. So by 2030, 100% of municipal energy use will be renewable, and by 2050, 100% of community energy use.
Right, right.
So can you just describe the difference?
Well, recognizing that we have more control over municipal energy use.
Mm-hmm.
And we're already well on the way with municipal. We've got quite a bit of the electrical use being offset by our two 500 kW solar arrays. And a lot of work going on with work on the individual buildings with energy audits and energy improvements, and the work with the wastewater treatment facility, which actually has a different name. But
Wastewater recovery,
recovery facility, okay.
or the water recovery,
Whatever, we know what it is.
the sewer plant.
Yeah, and so, trying to look at different options. The biggest stumbling block, I would say right now, that the committee's looking at is transportation, and trying to see how we can address transportation in terms of city vehicles, and also, I mean, the city has trucks and heavy equipment, that kind of thing.
So how would we know if we meet our goal of, let's say, 100% renewable municipal energy use?
Well,
And what does this mean? How are we?
it would mean that we're no longer expending money for fossil fuels. So no propane's being bought, no gasoline, no diesel. That all of that has been replaced by biodiesel or some other fuel.
And by we expending money,
The city,
the city.
yeah, so the budget would no longer have
So, okay.
fossil fuel. Yeah, that's good to have sort of a benchmark,
No city money on fossil fuels,
okay,
right?
yeah.
It's kind of like my gas stove, but.
I know, that's the hardest part. It's like, my husband will never give it up, ever. No.
So it's
We just have an asterisk in the
98%
plan
community energy
for
use
everything, but
renewable.
yes.
I'm just saying,
It's
how
just
high
sequester
is
it
high?
somehow.
I really
No.
liked 95%, but they decided to just dive in for 100. So, so obviously by 2050, we have a much bigger step to take in terms of getting the whole city wide. But the state also has a 2050 goal as well. This is more stringent than that, but not a whole lot. So we are trying to.
Yeah, so when you say community energy use, how is the committee defining that?
Again, that would be that the electricity was offset. So, we have net metering. So at some point, yes, we're gonna be drawing electricity from Green Mountain Power, but that we are ultimately putting back at the equal amount into the grid.
Well, they're
That's-
trying to go renewable anyway, right?
Yeah,
You said-
right, which actually helps us a lot. And then the other thing is heating fuels, and replacing heating fuels with alternative biofuels, or replacing them with, where possible, with heat pumps and other electrical.
Why are biofuels acceptable as far as, because carbon emissions is the concern here, right?
Actually, the fossil fuel consumption is the first one, but basically, yeah, the biofuels, as I understand it, I mean, I've seen some demonstrations. First of all, they're generated renewably,
Yeah.
and when they're burned, there are not the fumes being given off that are toxic. But the primary issue is, to my mind anyway, is source. But, yeah, so biofuels are a much more viable possibility than we thought originally.
Yeah, the corn, as it grows, it takes the carbon out of the air, makes it into the corn, which we crush into ethanol, which we burn, which releases CO2, which goes back into the next growing plant that grows in.
So it's neutral?
It's neutral.
It really
right,
is?
exactly, it's
Oh.
neutral, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
So
You're just
carbon
using
neutral.
farmland that could be used to produce food. You're not using it to produce, which it has impacts in the food costs because of that. So it's just one of those considerations that other people
But-
are looking at.
But ethanol is not the only biofuel.
Ethanol's
that we're
not the
looking
only
at.
one, but that's the
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah, so what are the
That's the
biofuels?
ones for vehicles.
Maybe I'm getting too down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, I think that's, we're gonna get way down there.
Okay,
So waste oils, basically.
okay. Big Bear biodiesel,
Exactly.
Black Bear biodiesel.
Black bear, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the top goal. I mean, that's what's written here. I don't
That's
think-
right, that is the
That's it.
top goal.
Okay. Moving
and
on.
and it'll have impacts across a wide range of everything from the transportation plan to the housing plan to the utilities facilities plan. It's
Yeah.
each one of these will reach out to a number of other ones, and that's just one that
Yeah.
that touches a lot of other plans.
I'm just curious, has MEAC and the Transportation Committee interacted much on this?
Well, I can't say exactly because I've been gone, so I haven't been at meetings. I know that right now there's a big focus on the municipal side, looking at municipal consumption. And so I can't say that there was as far as I know, a general outreach to the Transportation Committee. But I think that really needs to,
But do our buses count under the municipal goal?
what do you mean our buses?
Like the Montpelier circulator? Or
Oh, the circulator bus, yes.
Because I think that's funded through a city budget.
Partially?
Yep,
Was that-
and there's going to be considerations that have to go into reducing. Obviously, if your goal is to be 100% renewable, then you've got to eventually replace that bus with a 100% renewable fuel source.
I mean, there are
But
other.
sometimes you take things as a step in the right direction. If
Yeah.
the busing is
Yep, sorry. I'm
meaning
getting in the
27
weeds.
cars are off the road, then we've reduced the
That
amount
is-
of carbon that's being produced.
Okay.
And we're looking at other transportation options. So, not necessarily, continuing with the same transportation options that we have now and trying to replace their fuels.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious whether any of that work has already been done, or whether this is a great opportunity to bring the committees together and work through some of these challenges.
Well, I could tell you more after Thursday.
Okay.
The next meeting.
All right, well,
Okay,
we'll put a pin
that's
in
good.
that and just make a note. Real quick
But I
trans-
can also tell you that the Sustainable Montpelier Coalition is working on transportation options that would impact that as well.
Well, let's go to their goals then. Sustainable Montpelier Coalition. So there's 4 points here. The first is not labeled, there's 3 goals, but before the goals, there's notes that say reimagine and foster stakeholder, community, city engagement. So I guess that's sort of their charge.
Purpose.
Yeah. And then their goals are increase access to rivers and open space with a 2030 deadline attached for results. Second is to have 1,000 new housing units. And third is free downtown access from vehicles. What's that?
No more vehicles downtown is what I'm
Oh,
interpreting.
Yeah.
free the downtown.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
vehicles.
Yeah, sorry.
By the vehicle
Yes,
oppressors.
that's right. That's
Okay.
way wordy, yes.
And with the idea that using satellite lots could be a way to do that. So is that what you're getting at? Like-
Yes,
okay.
yeah, and the discussion about, reduction, eventual elimination of single occupancy vehicles. So that's where the transportation piece comes in, that they are moving forward along with the Department of Transportation and other stakeholders on putting together a alternative transportation plan. So all of those goals, by the way, are 2030, because that's when the coalition technically wants to be done with their work. So it's a little bit more ambitious than the 2050 goal.
Okay. Were they created for a limited time? Is there a sunset
They're a
date?
private
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they're grant funded, so,
Okay.
yeah, not connected with the city.
Okay.
So right now, what they're working on is the transportation piece and the open space piece, and they've been involved with, with the confluence parks.
Right, and
east
some of their
west.
members are on that committee, the proposal review committee for the downtown master plan, right?
That was, yeah, Elizabeth Courtney, who's a
Mhm.
consultant to SMC,
Mhm.
was involved with that.
Okay. So, going back to the order that these are presented in, I just kind of want to quickly go through them. Sorry, I got in the weeds, that was my fault, everybody, pull myself out. We'll quickly go through them and then talk about kind of a visioning statement, that was the idea. Just throw around some ideas. So, Conservation Commission's 3 goals are stormwater management plan, to inventory the natural resources in order to better protect them, and to do some public education about where the resources are. So I see those 2 as actually kind of tied, but one comes before the other, perhaps.
For the first one, did they have a goal of changing our system so that our stormwater system does not pollute at all? I mean, is that the goal?
I think they're involved in the development of the stormwater master plan, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, there was a lot that has been going on, and certainly is a lot at the state, and I think we've just got a lot of pieces that we haven't been doing as much as we could be with stormwater, and I think we just have a lot of pieces that just have to get pulled together. Our zoning didn't get an update to the stormwater rules because the state wasn't ready with their rules, so we still have to do that. We still got to get some.
Stephanie, do you have the PowerPoint in the files there? Because that might give us a
Oh,
little bit
that
more
was,
detail.
I made that, so yeah, somewhere in my files I do. Let's see.
Because it has been a while. I mean, the meeting was in August, so
They're digging.
it makes sense that we wouldn't remember.
I do have the slides. Let's see.
And there are state and national, federal rules that we need to meet for stormwater as well. Is that right?
Yeah,
don't have the
yeah.
notes.
There's the EPA. It's a TMDL requirement for Lake Champlain, which we're part of.
So there are,
That filters down through the state
It
rules.
works its way down to us. So.
Right, so we have requirements as well as goals.
yeah.
Yeah, and we've got floodplain and river corridors, and so there are a lot of pieces that, though not directly stormwater, are kind of related to water quality.
They didn't send us notes ahead of time, so I just have the placeholder with the committee
Oh,
name.
okay. All right. Well, I have an in with them, I could ask.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue for the city to contend with, so I think it's what we're gonna be
Be part of
working on.
the downtown master plan SE group effort, right?
Yeah, that'll certainly have a big impact.
Okay. And then as far as their mapping, I mean, are they working on the city map, what's it called?
The official map? No,
The
the official
official
map
map.
was kind of put to bed because that's not what the Parks Commission want. The inventory there is kind of, I think, more of a classic, just getting all of the inventorying all the data.
So no regulatory
Putting it
impact
onto
of
maps.
this.
Well, it could if we've got better data, and it points to something that we should be looking at from a regulatory standpoint. I mean, we've kind of jumped in with steep slopes and wetlands and vernal pools, but if there's something else that's in there that we should be considering in our zoning, I'm a big fan of regulating to the map. So if they are mapping resources and finding things that need to be protected, Act 250 looks at prime ag soils. I don't think we should be looking at them because we're kind of a city and we want people to be building here, so they're not building in the country. But obviously, any of these natural resources that get mapped could be used as a regulatory basis.
And by the way, the vernal pool in Hubbard Park near the new shelter, the wood frogs laid their eggs there. You can go see them right now. Pretty cool. There's a fence around it to keep the dogs out, but no buffer.
Isn't that the pond at the bottom of the hill that?
No,
Okay.
it's at the
Okay,
top.
good. I was gonna say the one at the bottom was supposed to be cleaned out this
Your
year.
dog hasn't gone in there, right?
What?
He's upstanding citizen.
He actually hasn't gone in this year. So.
Okay,
Cross your
so
fingers.
Montpelier Development Corp, their goals. The main, I guess, is like 3 ways to achieve this goal. The goal, Montpelier is a cultural, economic, social center. Number 1, wraparound for new and existing businesses. I don't know what that means.
Kinda made sense when she said it though.
Yep. Number 2, destination for arts and culture. Number 3, transform. Community values and amenities are realized, meaning the river, etc. So wrap around for new and
I
existing.
mean, is that like technical assistance or support or some,
I
in
think
some
so,
way?
yeah.
Existing businesses?
I'll make a note.
An embrace.
Nice.
An embrace.
Like all new and existing businesses.
Yep.
And I think it's services, right?
Okay.
And support.
Okay. It doesn't have like a hug emoji. Okay. Housing authority. So, I just want to note, there's a housing authority and a housing task force. The housing authority goals are to promote cooperation and communication with agencies, and I guess they mean which agencies?
Well, they're Washington County Mental Health, a
Okay.
couple other ones. I mean, so the housing authority is kind of the housing of last resort that the city has. So they administer the
Okay.
Section 8 vouchers, and they have housing in a number of locations, which is different than, say, Down Street, who has affordable housing.
Okay.
And so their coordination, they're usually coordinating with Social Security and Medicaid and Washington County Mental Health and, you know, these folks that are, you know, the police and fire when they, you know,
Hopefully it's
domestic
not-
violence.
Sorry, just a.
Oh,
Hopefully
you-
it's not
you
the
should know.
housing of last resort, but housing for people in, you know, straitened economic circumstances.
Thank you for
Hopefully it's
that.
not the last resort.
Thank you for the
Yes.
Should be quality.
Right.
Do they have any goals? I mean, do they want to see more housing developed, for their clients?
My memory of their presentation was they basically want to maintain what they have, which
Because federally, they're not
is
gonna,
their thing.
they're not gonna get one.
Yeah, I mean, housing authority, some other housing authorities do want to develop, but this housing authority has maybe a different outlook.
Okay. We'll just keep plugging through. So Transportation Committee, it's funny because I guess their 3 goals are implement the existing plans, safe and inviting atmosphere for pedestrian and bikes, and accommodate and encourage transit. So the existing plans are the Montpelier in Motion, Complete Streets, and Main Street Scoping Study. Is the Main Street Scoping Study the
Very
downtown
main
master?
scoping study, yeah.
Oh, it's okay, it's different from the downtown master
Yeah.
plan?
That's the thing is gonna be based on
Sorry.
the public works.
Very
Just not paying
main.
attention to the fact that you were writing.
No, actually, it's just.
It's hard to keep these all straight,
Mm-hmm.
and how they interrelate, and how they interact, so.
Yes, they were
Yeah.
each slightly different. We probably should have done them in a different order, but we got there anyways. So the complete streets looked at a street typology. What would you expect each one of the streets to have as their components? the Montpelier in Motion was really a gap analysis. Where are we missing our sidewalks? Where are we missing our bike lanes? We've got a sidewalk here that leads to nowhere. Then over there's the next sidewalk. We need to complete the sidewalk here. So that plan was really laying out a gap analysis of what we should be working on and where we should be prioritizing our fixes.
But sidewalk focus.
But, well, sidewalk, bike lanes, but mostly a lot of it is sidewalks.
So the relationship between the transportation committee and the city is pretty tight, I would hope, that things they identify are what the city ends up prioritizing.
Yeah, we're trying, the main point of those is to provide the evidence and information we need to develop the capital improvement plan, so that $600,000 we get every year to build new projects, retaining walls and sidewalks, repaving, painting, whatever it is, that we've got this chunk of funds, and so they've got a 10-year plan, and they lay out for 10 years what are all the projects we're going to be working on. Well, what comes out of these plans helps to push some things up to the front to get them done sooner. You know, scoring them a little bit better, moving them up in the capital improvement plan, or putting new things on the capital improvement plan that we didn't know about. So that's where the strongest link comes in for the transportation committee, is they fund a lot of their stuff through the next project in the line.
And that's the same as the infrastructure committee, transportation infrastructure?
Yeah, that's basically the transportation infrastructure committee. Because the other one that's the complete streets committee is really just more events.
Okay, all right, good.
Okay. Public Safety Authority. This is more about like dispatch services, right?
It's dispatch services. It's pretty much toast at this point, as far as I know. I don't think we funded them. I don't think they have any more money.
Yeah, I don't think they did, and I don't.
We
think they
finally
funded
pulled the
their-
plug on their funding,
Oh,
so
they're
I think they may
exists.
technically exist, because they're a chartered entity, but I don't know where
Like they
they're
don't
gonna
have
go.
staff.
So the
They might
goal-
have staff through June 30th, because their funding would end on July 1st, but,
But the goal was to look at a multi-city dispatch,
yeah.
right? And that seems to have kind of fallen apart.
I think that's a question we'd have to ask Kim Cheney. He was on the committee.
So are we resorting to state dispatch?
No, we still have our dispatch, and Berry City has their dispatch, but the thought was we could merge these two into a single dispatching service.
This committee was looking at that.
Could we, and there are a lot of sideshows that go along with it.
If we didn't have it, then we would just have the state dispatch, right?
Yes. But the thought was this does actually function for 27, like we provide service for a number of communities through contracts, so if we stopped doing it, it would require major expansion of the state E911 system, which may not always be good if you don't have the local knowledge. So an E911 call here in the city, you're going to get somebody in town that knows Montpelier, as opposed to getting an E911 call that's being dispatched through Williston with somebody who may never have been to Montpelier.
Is there any data that supports that? It's an argument people throw out along, and I've always wondered, like, one, you don't have guaranteed local knowledge for someone who works somewhere, and two, wouldn't a really good experienced dispatcher potentially offset some local knowledge?
A statewide experienced dispatcher?
I'm not suggesting one or the other. I'm just saying I've never seen any kind of data that supports one argument or another. But maybe let's not go into these weeds and bat this hornet's nest, because
Yeah, I think we
We're
would
also
have to
geographically
invite them.
small, which
Yeah.
makes it less likely for somebody to get lost.
Yeah, I think we would have to invite folks to come
We
in
have
and
lots
pitch
of
both
dead
sides. And
ends
And how many other areas does our dispatch work for? Berlin and other surrounding?
it's really a mix. It's really a mix. I think they've got 20-something towns that we do,
That we
and
do.
Montpelier has a handful that they do. Berlin, I think, is serviced by the state police, and
Hi, Emery. Thanks for coming.
there are some others that are different as well. So and I know there was some discussion of the way things work right now. You know, if somebody called, if it got dispatched to fire, then it's going through one service. Just if it was dispatched to police, it's going through another service. And so, in a situation which may have multiple dispatching things going on, you're going to have two separate sets of communications going that aren't connected. But like I said, this is not something I'm versed at. I've sat in a couple of council meetings while they've had some debates on these.
You could go to those, John.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Seems like the return on investment for us messing around in there might be pretty low for this, given if this thing fell apart.
Well, let's move
Yeah.
on to the housing task force on that note. So this is the group that wants to expand housing.
Yes.
Okay.
These are your big heavy hitters of housing.
Okay, so their goals are to have adequate rental and owner-occupied homes with diverse, and then something kind of fell off there, but I guess I'm assuming it's diverse types of homes
Yeah.
for different needs, to fulfill different needs. They want to have safe, healthy, energy efficient, resilient, accessible, mix of uses and open space. So I guess it's access to those sort of uses from these homes. And then housing for all, fair housing and inclusive community. Thoughts? Questions?
I feel like that needs to be fleshed out a lot. Because, I mean, we know it's a major need, and to have some actual, like, goals. Like, we have the Sustainable Montpelier Coalition asking for 1,000 new
Yeah.
units. That doesn't have a timeline on it, but I think fleshing out.
2030.
It is?
Well, we've talked about how the Sustainable Montpelier Coalition wants to have their work done in 2030.
Okay, so you think that means 2030?
Well, we can assume that.
That was based on the competition, which was a 2030 goal.
Okay.
So that was 1,000 new units, so that's where that came from.
Yeah, the adopted numbers for the housing task force are 150 housing units in 5 years and 240 in 8,
Okay, 150 in 5 years.
and 240 over the 8 years.
What are we currently doing? Like, how many units did we have last year?
The last year was not bad, depending on when you're counting the year, because we had 18 for French Block and 6 more for
So yeah, French Block, for instance, was a
Maple.
pretty big project, but that just amounted to 18 units.
Yep, and then there were 6 more in the Maple, which is the end of Charles Street there, little extension, and then there were a handful of 1s and 2s around here and there. We'll get a better number in the next couple of weeks. We'll get some better numbers of how many, but usually we're talking 10 units a year if we're lucky.
And how many are we adding on Taylor Street?
The big projects are making big difference. Taylor will be 30, and then there's another 30 proposed for the Christ Church, which is, if the parking garage gets built, then Christ Church would be another 30.
We have a long way to go to get to 1,000.
Yeah, it's a long way to go to get to 1,000. The big ones kind of come in if you can get a big project. You know, the potential is 225 units for Savings Pasture. I mean, it could be more than that, but the Trust for Public Lands was talking about 225 units. So the Team Bridges proposal was talking hundreds, but that requires a much bigger lift. If you want to reach the 1,000, then you have to talk about making that rail line and making it for that trolley bus shuttle system, where we could put a couple hundred units on Pioneer Street and then a couple hundred more units as you're going out, to help people give people options where they could live without a car and just take these shuttles into the downtown to go to work, or shuttle out to Price Chopper and those places to go shopping. You know, you can get some movement moving around, and then having some microtransit or other opportunities to kind of take those other places. But that's the bigger, if you want to get that 1,000, that's what you're talking about, is having to do some big
Looking at
transformational projects.
right, at neighborhoods, not just individual buildings.
Yeah, you're building
Building
neighborhoods to make 1,000, and I didn't realize it was that hard. I was really surprised to see how hard it was. You know, you
I
see a
was
big
too.
building and you think, oh, that must be a lot of units, and you find out, oh, that's, you know, French Block was 18. And
I mean, there is some movement too, and so I think some of the bridges included this, is that micro units. So potentially in a fairly large building, you could have a lot more units than what you would normally think. That we could have micro
Yep.
units that were half the size of the units in the French Block.
yeah, and the ADU program that's being proposed, the accessory dwelling units
Yeah.
is another one where we've got $500,000, and it looks really likely that we're going to be able to just help people add units to existing houses. So it's going to be building right into infill into the neighborhoods, and there's a lot of people who are interested in putting an apartment over a garage, putting an apartment in their house, subdividing a second floor, whatever.
So is that new money, the ADU program?
That is a community development block grant with funding from the city and with funding from the people who are doing it, which is, I'll probably get the wrong one, VCFA? One of these housing, one of the housing ones.
VCHB,
Yeah,
Vermont Conservation Housing Board?
yeah.
It's VHCB.
VHCB.
That's right.
Wait, what is it?
Okay.
VHCB.
VHCB.
No, it's not
I don't
VHCB,
think
that's
it was
why.
yours. Yeah, it's
curious.
the finance, there's a finance, housing finance,
Oh, VHFA.
VHFA.
Oh, okay, I didn't
There we
know
go.
they were doing that.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so they did a pilot in Brattleboro,
What does VHFA stand for?
Vermont Housing Finance Agency.
Okay.
Welcome to another episode of World of Acronyms.
Yes,
Well, I'm
which is
not
why I
gonna-
prefaced
Right,
my
I know,
statement,
you
and
know,
I'm
I
going to
had
get
to-
the letters wrong because I can't remember which
I just
one
let
it is.
Wash over me.
But the idea is they were going to put in 150,000. The thought was, you look at these large projects, whether it's Down Street or Vermont Housing, and they cost $250,000 a unit, $230,000 to $250,000 a unit to build or renovate a major unit. And the ask here was for $300,000, so we could do 30 units. So we're going to try to get a lot more units for the same amount, because the state's looking at their budgets and saying, boy, if we need statewide X number of thousand units, I mean, that's millions upon millions. We're just going to keep bonding ourselves out. So we need to find a more cost-effective way to add more units. This ADU program is a match money, so Kirby wants to put in an ADU and goes and says, hey, if I had that, I could make an extra $1,000. That helps me, because I could rent this unit out for $800 or $1,000 a month, and I'm doing better affording my house. Plus, I'm making another affordable housing unit for somebody else. It's going to cost me $40,000 to do this, to put in this new unit. Well, if you can do, get a line of credit or do something like that, borrow some money, we'll match that money up to $10,000 or $20,000. We can give a 0% loan. We can, they bundle up a bunch of money to then try to help people do it. And they put the proposal out, and we got, more than 20 people who were interested.
Oh, did you have people signed up?
Well, because we
Great.
wanted to be, when we went to the state for our application, we wanted to be able to make sure we were in the front of the line, because there's more projects and there are money, so we wanted to make sure that this pilot program would be up front. And so by putting it out and saying, hey, who's interested, we could put into the application that says, look, you give us the money, this year we could start working on these. So you should fund us before you fund those guys who have a great idea, but they're not ready to go yet. We're ready to go. So that was our thought. So we had a lot of people who are interested in doing these, and so we're hoping we'll get funded and we'll be able to start working on those this year. But that would be, 10, 20 units, one at a time, but
And you're up to 10,000 per unit.
you'd have to, the specifics,
Something
yeah, the
like that,
specifics,
okay.
you'd have to contact
When
Kevin.
do we find out if we've gotten that?
I don't remember when the next,
I'm actually thinking maybe this is a proposal to us and we just haven't reviewed it yet, so I can find out.
Okay,
about
all
Okay.
right.
I think.
It-
Or
I'm
talk
more
with
familiar
talk
all
with
the time.
Kevin, yeah.
yeah, there's, because they're funding from a number of people. We've got money, they've got money, Community Development Block Grant has money. It's gonna be kind of a thing where everybody throws some money in, to try to make it happen. But I think it's another way of getting one of those, when we start talking about how do we get 150 units, there's gonna be some of these that are gonna be big chunks, there are gonna be some of these that are gonna be small chunks, and some of these that are just gonna be one at a time.
Does, I don't know if we've talked about plans for MPG application, but it'd be interesting to see if it could be complementary, maybe to
MPG?
this, municipal planning grant, which we apply for, I think, most years.
Mhm.
And one thing specifically that could be interesting is there's a group called the Incremental Development Alliance, led by someone named John Anderson, but not our John Anderson. So the flyers for this could be confusing. This was an event. They come and they do a developers boot camp, and they sort of focus on small towns across the country, and the message is mostly like, all of these groups are trying to encourage housing and development downtown, and you have a lot of well-meaning people coming up with regulations for like these developers that don't exist, that are going to come from somewhere to build something, and the reality is it's just not going to happen. And that if anyone's going to build something, it's going to be you, and that's how American small towns grew forever. It was people building things, small, maybe 4-unit, 6-unit buildings, and it's not that hard. They basically put down like the social sort of, I think they have a 3-day thing, but also provides a bit of a community on how you can become a developer. I think something like that could.
What's the company called again?
It's a nonprofit, I think, called Incremental Development Alliance. And John Anderson is, I think, their main speaker. He's great. He's very crass, but it works well. He's funny and great as long as people are okay with you saying.
Colorful language.
So compatible for the most conservative church in
Montpelier, I don't know what that means, but
We'll have him speak at all speaks next year.
It won't be the most difficult.
You're wearing your uniform costume. So, your thought is that we could integrate that through the municipal planning grant?
yeah, or find some funding source. I don't know how much it is to have them do a workshop, but
So Mike, when is the municipal planning grant deadline?
In the fall,
Okay.
but if we have specific things that we think we want to start exploring, we can certainly pull them together. Because one of the new things that they let us do now is to put projects out to bid early. So if we know what we'd like to do in the fall, we could put out an RFP in June or July to solicit bids for what we want to do, and then you're actually applying for the money to do the project, and it gets better points, and it's something new that they're doing, and I kind of like it. It makes it, you know how much you're going to spend because you've already bid it out, and they've already told you we can do this project for $15,000, so you can put it in and say we've already bid it, it's $15,000, and then you're ready to go. Instead of getting the funding, doing your RFP, and then finding out, oh, we got a grant for $18,000 to do a project that's costing us $21,000. Now what do we do?
So are people interested in pursuing grant money to put on a workshop, develop a boot camp workshop related to housing?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, like I said, I can look and see what we know and how much these are, and if there's something that would be competitive. No.
Sounds like John is.
Sounds like
Yeah,
John is.
The source of information.
It's a lot of most of the folks are senior people, Congress and New York.
Or the development corporation. Either one of those could be partners in this, seems like.
The Housing Task Force.
Mhm.
And I think ARP and BNRC brought them in to give a talk, brought him in to give a talk on some smart growth event.
I'll look into it, see what the costs or
So,
pieces are. And
potential partners, the development. So Laura left, right? So Development Corp. What was the other one you named besides the housing?
The Regional Planning Commission,
Okay.
although, I mean, part of our goal is to have development in urban areas, not the entire region, but
Mm-hmm.
they do have funding for things, so.
yeah.
Okay. Good idea. All right, next, I think it's helpful for us to go through these goals. I know it seems a little bit tedious, but I think
No,
it's
it's
really
definitely
triggering some ideas. So, Parks Commission, their list, the bullets say this: green print, parks and trail access to all residents, enhance outdoor recreation facilities for all abilities and types of activity, protect, preserve natural areas, eradicate invasives, and parks advocation for improvement. Green print, that's the map, the trail map, right?
That's trails and parks. So it's kind of a mix of a
Planned
map.
trails and parks?
That's the thing, it's planned, and what they were hoping for, and this was part of the confusion of the official map, was they wanted to get the green print map, an idea, adopted officially, but what they didn't realize was that all they had to do was go to city council and give a presentation, and council would adopt it, and it would be adopted.
Yeah.
And so in the end, it was like, well, if that's all you want, then just go to city council and get it adopted, so that's what they're gonna be doing.
Okay.
So,
And the implications for an official map like that is that the city has first right of refusal?
it starts to, it forces a process, which was counter to actually what the green print said, which was, in it, the green print kind of expressly says, this is all about willing buyer, willing seller, we're not here to force this upon you. And then when we're talking about the official map, we're talking about basically forcing you to give us an option on the property when you go to develop the land. And so, it was one they really weren't comfortable with, and in the end, I think it worked out well, because what they want to do is to have it adopted, the green print, so they can start to pursue grant funding to try to purchase land. Because there's properties come up where they can actually reach out to people to go through and say, we'd love to put a trail across your property. You know, we've got some grant funding, you know. They just wanted to have more of an opportunity, but they couldn't apply for grants because the plan had never been adopted.
So we don't have to worry about the official map anymore?
You don't
What
have
I'm
to worry about the
hearing?
official map anymore.
Okay, well,
Unless
that's
somebody
okay.
else comes up with some other reason why we would want to pursue it. But
So we don't have to have one,
No.
is what you're saying?
no, there are only a handful of towns that do.
Oh, I thought it was a requirement.
No, I mean, we have to have our land use map as part of our city plan, but the official map piece, so background for
Never
everybody.
understood this.
Background
Never
alert,
It's
there's
really
a story.
confusing.
So, when we were working through the zoning on, I can't remember what the exact issue was here, but I think there was some question about whether the natural resources maps, which would trigger some restrictions on development around wetlands, whether there would be the integration of the green print trail map as part of that process. And we determined as a commission that the official map was a better way to go about that than through the zoning, and explain that to the Parks Commission. And
Yeah.
so as far as, you know, setting goals for where parks should be or where trails should be and working through the process with landowners through zoning, we kicked it to the official map development, which apparently they're now
Has
pursuing
since
without
gone.
our aid, which is
Yeah,
great.
the other piece that came up in the zoning and how this all came out was from, there's a tendency for people to go and start, you know, somebody comes up and develop, let's say Saban's pasture, and people start to go and say, oh, but you should, you know, we should, if you're gonna make that open space on top, you should make it open to the public. And you can't use zoning, the case, the Supreme Court has recently just kept pushing towards a certain pretty clear point, which is that you can't use regulations to deny somebody their constitutional rights, and if you're going to open something up to public use, you have to pay just compensation. So you can't use zoning to create a bike path across somebody's property, or, you know, provide public access, you know. And so we eventually came across to go through and say, if you want to require public access, you can't use zoning, you'd have to use an official map, and we would have to buy it. And so there were a number of cases where people came up and pushed and wanted to get that option to be able to buy those rights. And so that was where that, and it eventually kind of fell off because the parks really wasn't interested in kind of forcing that. They would rather try to negotiate for the right to cross somebody's land.
So it seems like the green print and then the next bullet, parks and trail access to all residents, is kind of tied together. Or the green print is one method of making this goal come to fruition.
Yes.
Enhance outdoor recreation facilities for all abilities and types of activity. Protect, preserve natural areas. So I guess that would be tied to Conservation Commission goals.
Yeah, the Parks Commission owns the land, so in a number of cases, whether we're talking about buying a piece of land to protect it from development because it's a rare natural species habitat, the Conservation Commission doesn't, they may want it, but it's not gonna, they can't own the land, so the Parks Commission ends up kind of doing the recreation fields that are at the rec down the road on Elm Street, and they also have the places where we're just conserving land for conservation purposes.
Mhm.
So they do preservation and conservation.
Okay.
In terms of how it might impact the city plan, was one of their thoughts that they wanted every house, every dwelling unit to have access to parks within a certain distance.
Yeah, 10-minute walk or something.
Yeah, right, so that becomes more of a planning issue for us then, to
Yeah,
really look
time.
at those little pocket parks,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily big parks.
Did you say you were running out of time?
Yeah, we're running out of time. I'm just realizing we only have 8 minutes left, and we're not gonna get through all these goals to come up with our visioning statement. Who was it who came up with the idea for the visioning statement? Was that, really don't want to be you, Stephanie?
Yeah,
Maybe you can give us some more guidance on what you're thinking of, and then we can come back with ideas.
my thought was just that we spent the energy getting all of these thoughts, so that was one piece, but then
Mhm.
also that we're talking about the plan and in these separate sections by committee.
Mhm.
So to some degree, we're sort of talking about it like we're outsourcing that work, and for me, it would be helpful that this committee have some sort of overall
Yeah,
vision that we're putting out to those committees, so that they're not just each doing their own separate thing.
right. Yeah, I agree. So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then we have the template that I did up for the energy committee based on what Barb had given me, which provides the visioning statement. There's 3 parts: visioning statement, then measurable sort of objectives, and then implementation, new policies and actions.
So those visioning statements for each committee, or each, right,
Right.
but not an overall vision, which is what
And that's a cohesive, bringing
draws
the committees
everybody
together.
Yeah, and it seems like that's what we should be doing, is looking at all of these, and just, I don't know, and reading through all of them, it does seem like there is sort of a theme emerging that ties all together. It feels like a lot of it is around sort of housing and walkability in downtown and making Montpelier a place for human beings to live in.
Making Montpelier a place.
Laudable goals.
Yeah.
Our vision for Montpelier is a place for human beings to live.
It might be a tough vision.
Welcome to Montpelier, a place for you.
A place for humans.
A place for people.
Wait till all species. Wait till all species goes after you.
This is a great starting point. You just need some ideas to work with and start molding. I mean, so pedestrian or walkability.
Sustainability seems to be coming up. Energy and everything.
Sustainability.
Density.
No, don't use that
Ooh.
word.
Sorry,
I'll use the
no, I
D
mean,
word.
not replacing, parking lots, basically, creating more cohesive,
Transport,
options.
housing options.
No, it's true.
Something like utilizing our vacant spaces downtown more fully.
Yeah.
Something in that.
And also utilizing, when you said that, utilizing our natural, amenities, the amenities that we have, which are the river and the.
That comes
Yeah.
up a lot.
Yeah.
The
it
river
does.
comes up a lot.
Yeah, and we have to recognize our amenities.
Highlighting them instead of like
Yes, exactly, yeah, we're,
turning
yeah,
our back to them.
making them an element of the city.
Does anyone know if part of the green print included future parks along the river?
Don't remember. Most of the parks I remember on that were more on the outsides, more of a hub and spoke approach. So we had a Hubbard Park. We've got a, you know.
Right, so the hub, the Confluence Park is part of that, but there's also now a group of people who are looking at, I think what she's calling 5 bridges, basically looking at the string of the river as it goes through the downtown and trying to develop more as parkland.
Seems like that would attract development. People have that.
The Riverwalk.
So what are the key amenities of the city? We heard, I just, let's list them off. So the river.
River.
Hubbard Park.
What's that?
Hubbard Park.
Hubbard Park, yeah.
What about the historic downtown?
Yes.
The Dairy Cream.
Yeah.
Historic neighborhoods.
Just food in general, places to buy different types of food.
Just right, poutine.
Oh, God. The state capitol, I mean, being the capital is really, we don't go there anymore.
I'm not hearing anything
Yeah.
about housing.
Um,
We need to, that's something we need to change, right? I mean, amenities, we need more like,
Well,
the amenities we have.
our.
That makes me think
I-
in terms of like public amenities.
Yeah, you're
more
right.
so
So we're
as,
thinking,
like-
we're thinking
Right.
geographically, environmental amenities right
Yeah.
now. Okay.
But also, I mean, if we're talking about our historic downtown and our historic neighborhoods as well, which those are housing.
Well, you could say that the historic housing stock is not in a practical sense, that we have old housing stock, which is difficult, yeah.
Except that that's what draws people here. That's why
Okay.
a lot of people move here.
So,
They like the historic neighborhoods.
Challenges,
It's,
okay.
No, I think that's a good point, though. The historic buildings not necessarily meeting the current needs. So like College Street, these gigantic houses that a lot of people can't afford to buy, much less heat, as one unit. So that's not,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful historic building, but is it functional in that sense for what we need right now?
It's stuff
Yeah,
that's
that's exactly
mismatched
what
to
it is.
our
Well,
needs and
adapting.
demographics.
Right, so how do we
Adapting
adapt
exists,
to
yeah,
make it,
because
right?
they certainly could be matched fairly easily.
Right, but without losing that cultural, historic structure.
So maybe we're talking about maintaining historic neighborhoods.
But we're just identifying challenges
All right,
right now.
yeah.
We'll get to
Or
solutions at some
amenities,
point,
yeah.
but, I mean, amenities, and I heard amenities kind of morph into challenges, so I thought let's just start with challenges.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's
Negative.
good. Let's just take 30 more seconds to 1 minute. And other challenges.
Just the volume of housing stuff.
Yeah, lack of housing.
Transportation, I don't know how you would word it, but, I mean, we've got, when you have 8,000 people come to town every day, so parking is a challenge. And it's
Yeah.
just, to a certain extent, there is a desire to not have parking and not have cars, but to a certain extent, you'll have consequences that will come out of that.
So the tension between being the capital and hosting.
Being a job center and,
Jobs,
yeah.
I mean,
swelling, the population doubling.
yeah, that sort of bleeds into, there's both local and regional public transit challenges.
I think there were a partnership with the state seems to be an elephant in the room for a lot of these things. Like the state needs to help us solve the parking problem over time there.
Yeah, just giving every employee a free parking space downtown.
Would you like to be the person who tells them they have to pay now?
I've done it before. Continue to do it, but
Jen doesn't care.
people aren't very this idea is not terribly popular.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
And the state owns a decent number of lots too.
It's
right?
huge,
Yeah.
huge percentage of it is state and city.
All right, well, let's pick up this discussion next
City
time.
turned around and gave $600 to give up the parking pass.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
state.
cash out. California requires it.
The city, that's what the city did this year to try to open up more parking spaces. They offered everybody the money to cash out their parking pass.
How did that work?
Didn't get as many as they had hoped, but
This is
they
for
got,
city employees.
yeah, for city employees. But I think 6 of us cashed
As
out.
a state
What was
employee
the-
who walks to work, I didn't want to hear about getting some free money.
What was the cash out value?
$50 a month.
It's not chump change.
They could do
So-
it start with like legislators, right?
So then where
Just
do
put up
you
meters
cut
and then they can
I
all
park on
split the
Stonecutters
money they
out,
get from the meters.
a little further?
out farther, but it's
Yeah.
in parking that nobody parks in.
Sell all
So
that
Right,
land
so might
that
as well
the
utilize
parking
it.
lots are on and build a garage behind the tax department. Something like that.
All right,
Well, yeah.
let's pick this up next
Sell
time.
that next time.
We'll finish going through the notes from the all committee
parking.
meeting. We'll see if we can get to some sort of visioning statement, broadly, and if we need to start with some of the.
I think we figured it out.
Well-
Montpelier, a place for humans.
I mean, I
right.
Nope.
appreciate the succinct
Wait,
nature.
wait, before everybody packs up
Humans
and go,
welcome.
let's quickly look at the meeting minutes from April
A
8th.
place for humans and their pets.
Sorry to,
At least
Okay.
they see
That'd be more
Or
political
in their
than
pets.
really.
do I have a
Okay,
motion to
appreciate it.
approve these minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
So, Ariane moved, Stephanie seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, vote aye.
I
All those opposed? None. They are approved. There is no meeting on May 27th, Memorial Day. Do you folks think we need to meet next time? Based on our discussion today, I think we could wait till June 10th. Pick this up then. Mike's gonna drop some things in the Google Drive, so take a look at that in between now and then. And we'll pick this up and we can look at the map again maybe next time, and bring our computers, assuming you're here.
Yeah.
No.
The information from, the competition, did that end up on our Google Drive?
It's been there for like a year.
Yeah, okay.
I
just
think it was
wanted to
one of the
make sure.
first things that popped up.
Everybody's homework is to take a look at the Google
Yeah.
Drive.
I
That's the
get it.
homework, okay? All right, do you have a motion to adjourn? Okay, Aaron,
Aaron,
second?
I'll second.
Okay,
Kirby.
all those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.